Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 5 Technology News. This is your host, Dr. Yavuz Selim Salai, physician, entrepreneur, and venture architect. Today, I have really exciting 5 top news for you. In London's Heathrow Airport, they have been told that now they have a goal for a zero-carbon airport by mid-2030. And this has already achieved the goal for its infrastructure. The United Kingdom's largest airport, located near London, has invested over £100 million to improve its energy efficiency. Our second news is about Sonic Boom. I know many of you love Sonic Boom. And games take the technology to the next level. Little blue hedgehogs aren't the only important innovation to have come from gaming. Sonic arrives on the big screen, and after 30 years battling Robotnik on the small screen, and indeed, the very small screen. Our third news is about Gene Page, who is a principal technologist of BAE Systems. Gene Page has seen sweeping changes in engineering, which worked more than 3 decades, and innovation as well. So engineering and innovation, once dominated by the defense industry, now relies on collaboration with the medical and gaming industries. Our fourth news is about a breach on White House in Washington, D.C. The data breach hits agency overseeing White House communications. Our fifth news is about a skin detection software which could improve actually your smartphone's security. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm starting with my first news. As I mentioned before, the United Kingdom's largest airport, Heathrow, has said it will become a zero-carbon airport by mid-2030s and has already achieved the goal for its infrastructure.
London's Heathrow is the busiest airport in Europe, but from today has another status when it comes to tackling climate change. Now carbon neutral, it hopes the airport infrastructure won't be producing any carbon emissions at all by the mid-2030s. Matt Gorman, Heathrow's Director of Sustainability, says the airport is the first in the world to make such a pledge.
The enemy at the end of the day is not aviation, it's carbon. Our collective challenge, this isn't just aviation, is to get carbon out of the economy as quickly as possible, and we have to play our role in getting there.
Sure, but still, doesn't it feel awkward that you're making these kind of laudable emission statements, but actually you're servicing such a sort of carbon-intensive industry?
Not at all. I think, personally, I believe that aviation brings huge benefits economically, socially and culturally.
Heathrow's commitments cover emissions generated by its own operations, including airport buildings, infrastructure, business travel and its vehicles. But they don't include emissions from its suppliers, airport businesses like shops and restaurants, the possible construction of a third runway, or, crucially, the flights. In spite of climate concerns, record numbers are expected to take to the skies globally in 2020. As airports have grown, the objective has been to travel as quickly and as cheaply as possible. But companies are under pressure to consider the cost to the environment.
Our initiative is more broad-based than just net zero.
We set ourselves a goal to become net zero carbon by 2030.
Our aim to be net zero.
There's been a flurry of announcements by big businesses promising to reduce or eliminate their carbon footprint. The government says Britain will be carbon neutral by 2050, but hasn't created any kind of regulatory body to check the voluntary pledges being made.
There's really no rigour as to whether whether these meet the test. Are they going to allow the country to actually meet its net zero target by 2050? Polling last year showed that 30% of companies don't even have a plan.
In spite of promises to reduce airport emissions, aviation emissions are expected to rise dramatically. Sustainable air travel from start to finish is still a long way off. Lisa Holland, Sky News.
And the United Kingdom's largest airport, located near London, has invested more than £100 million to improve its energy efficiency, as well as generating and purchasing renewable energy. Heathrow has reduced carbon emissions from airport buildings and infrastructures by 93% compared to 1990. The remaining 7% of airport infrastructure emissions, including those from heating, will now be offset through 3 planting projects in Indonesia and Mexico, certified through the verified carbon standard, which the airport described as interim measure. This year, Heathrow will increase investment for sustainable transport links and ensure it meets its target to transition all of its cars and small vans to electric and plug-in hybrids. The airport, which is the size of a very small city, added it was one of the world's first major carbon aviation hubs, which is becoming carbon neutral. Earlier this month, United Kingdom's aviation industry pledged to reduce its net carbon emissions to zero by 2050. Congratulations to the United Kingdom's aviation industry. And while other forms of transport offer a relatively straightforward path to a carbon neutrality, sustainable aviation is proving difficult with current technologies. While some firms are developing electric planes which may be effective for short-haul flights, current battery technology is unable to store the amount of energy needed for long-haul journeys. Carbon dioxide emissions from airlines have been rising in recent years and globally. Aviation is making up an increasingly large part of overall emissions from transport. Heathrow Airport's chief executive, John Holland Kay, said, "Making our infrastructure entirely carbon neutral is a significant milestone and a testament to the determination of our airport to help spearhead a new era of sustainable aviation." Their sights are now set on working with the global aviation industry to deliver on net zero by 2050 at the latest. Now, Heathrow can and will cut the environmental cost of flying while keeping the benefits of travel for future generations. Congratulations to United Kingdom. And our second news is Sonic Boom. Many of you love Sonic Boom, I know it. And some games take actually technology to the next level. These little blue hedgehogs aren't the only important innovation to have come from gaming. Sonic arrives on the big screen, and after 30 years battling Robotnik on the small screen, and indeed the very small screen. These little blue hedgehogs are actually are very interesting because it may be outside their comfort zone. It's not really a bigger pond for the little blue hedgehog. The games industry was the new kid on the block back then, but today it is bigger than the movie and the music industries combined. So this is a good example of how industries are changing, ladies and gentlemen. So now the gaming is much bigger than movie and the music industry. Can you believe it? Did actually any of you see that coming? When I was covering the defense and aerospace sector in electronics back in the 1990s, they weren't the big volume drivers, but they were vital in terms of investment and technological innovation. Defense suppliers would place orders for silicon or more likely gallium arsenide chips in the mere dozens, but the defense industry was doing that research and development that would one day spin off into everything else, including computer games. It was in the 1990s, though, that chip makers started saying, sorry, no, we don't have the time or the inclination to drop everything and make you a few dozen devices anymore. We're just too busy making parts for Nintendos and Segas. Thank you very much. Somewhere along the way, the flow of innovation and inspiration got switched around. Professional flight simulators that once cost thousands made their way onto personal computers for just a few dollars. Virtual reality, head-up displays, you name it. It started in defense and aerospace. Yet it wasn't long before changing industry. Economics meant defense and aerospace were looking to off-the-shelf developments from the games and entertainment industry. It's an observation echoed by the BAE Systems principal technologies, Jean Page. In her interview with Nick Smith 3 decades ago, she says, when I first started in the business, these technologies were driven by the defense industry. But today, it is increasingly the gaming industry that is driving the technology. They are also taking inspiration from consumer technologies like augmented reality and autonomous vehicles, as well as medical technologies. But the gaming's influence is to be found everywhere in electronics. Chris Edwards looks at how gaming technology has profoundly changed computing over the last 3 decades. Siapan Doyle talks to experts at the United Kingdom's first dedicated wargaming center for the combined defense services. Could hacking games be a gateway into serious cybercrime? Is what seems like a victimless crime having more serious consequences? Ben Hubble talks to hacker Jake Davis, known as Topiary, about how his career started with 3D pinball on his own personal computer. So, And during that interview and review section, Pete Etchells also argued that gaming provides many positives and doesn't deserve the negative press it receives for its effects on our society. Like most parents, also Pete remains skeptical. And admittedly, Pete once stayed up all night reading Catch-22, but reading at night usually just sends them to sleep, not so playing games that involve more interaction and adrenaline. So perhaps Pete is also just a sort of prejudiced parent, he argues, has got gaming all wrong. So this is really interesting, ladies and gentlemen, because as we can all see nowadays, for example, Page from the BAE Systems Air is giving an example of a military aircraft manufacturer, which is BAE. Now, currently with the high-profile Eurofighter Typhoon, four-nation collaboration with Germany, Italy, and Spain as one of the main products on its books. And despite that, the company's main customer has traditionally been the United Kingdom Ministry of Defense. They became a global company working with several other countries. They are not just here to satisfy the United Kingdom's requirements. They also have other products such as training on ground-based simulators. It is about delivering defense capabilities to a global market. And Page explains that the role has really evolved and changed at BAE Systems because there is a recognition that their key to success for their business is the people that can drive forward the technology agenda and change. Technologists are important because, of course, they have an understanding of the technology requirements of the aircraft's programs, but their primary role is external engagement to understand what's going on in the outside world, whether that be looking at who's funding what or what other organizations are doing. It's a rich picture, but it's all about who is doing what and where it's going and where it will be in the next 5, 10, and 20 years. In 5TN, this is what we're also aiming, right, ladies and gentlemen? The top news that actually give us an impression about the next 5, 10, and 20 years. So Page is saying that technologies need to be a bit visionary in that respect. The information Page garners is fed to other technologists within the organization. While much of her research is structured, where the technologist really plays a part in the disruptive element, such as things happening in adjacent industries, they have not actually previously looked at. So at this point, Page refers to her background as a human factors engineer and psychologist, which gives her the experience to investigate areas such as the medical sector for inspiration. If you look at the human augmentation, what they are doing at BAE, a lot of it is coming out of medical industry robotics technology, for example. And she goes on to say the reason for such interest is that these are the technologies that can assist with overcoming similar problems in aircraft, particularly cockpit design. So you can imagine that at 9G, you can't really move your arms as freely as usual, which means that some of the technologies used in the medical therapy environment can be of use to them for different reasons. So 3 decades ago, she says, when she started in this business, these technologies were driven by only the defense industry. But today, it is increasingly the gaming industry that is driving the technology, with the defense sector noting developments and analyzing their relevance. So therefore, they are interested in eye tracking because there are several advantages to using it. Yet they also need to make sure that it will work in a cockpit that has high ambient light and vibration. It may be relevant technology for on the ground if you are operating an unmanned air vehicle, but it may not be suitable for the air model. Or they might have to do something, the eye trackers in the gaming market, to make them work for them. So back in the day, when looking to identify technologies to integrate into the portfolio, it was possible to analyze them. But if you didn't think it was mature enough, you could leave it alone, even for a couple of years, before getting back to it. You don't have the luxury now. So one of Page's current project is actually human augmentation. While she predicts the human will always remain critical to military decision-making, increasingly they are seeing autonomous vehicles, a scenario in which a human is remotely operating one or more vehicles. The key point here is that if you have got humans in the loop in this new complex environment, how are we going to help the human? So we are now entering, ladies and gentlemen, an age where the amount of data is phenomenal. There is simply too much for an individual human to digest. And autonomous systems and computing generally have a big part to play in processing that data. But there's also the issue of how that data is presented to humans, so that when they make a decision, they can be held accountable and responsible. So this trusted element of autonomy is going to be key. For Paige, the three technology areas for making this happen are data analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. She points out that the products have a very long life cycle in the aerospace, like 50 or 60 years is typical. So this often means the aircraft that initially goes into service will be very different from what you have at the end of its life. It will have seen several upgrades, and the environment in which it operates will have changed. With competitors taking full advantage of what's available on the market, the need to upgrade products faster is more pressing than ever. This means it is no longer possible to rely on an engineering-led requirement wish list to fully develop products offerings. We need to consider what might be needed in a different way. We are entering an age where the amount of data is phenomenal and there is simply too much for an individual human to digest. So, Paige was saying we'll be in 40 years in a very different environment, while the rest of us might be looking nearer term. And that's why I think what she's highlighting is extremely important in terms of designing new technologies. And actually now it is clearly led by gaming technology, not by other technologies. And while defense was leading, now actually gaming industry is inspiring defense, as well as medical technologies are inspiring defense. And this is particularly very interesting for me, and I thought that's why our viewers should also know about the situation where the BAE engineering is working currently, because there are many technology companies who can actually learn from this. At the end, it's a face-to-face network, and that face-to-face network unfortunately no longer exists. So being able to share information digitally means that collaboration has moved on another step. So you are not relying on the person to drive the conversation so much as the digital knowledge. So if we go forward, actually one generation perhaps, it will be the machine learning, artificial intelligence, telling us what effect of a 20% change here or there will make. Ladies and gentlemen, my fourth news is about a very important data breach. A data breach hits agency overseeing White House in Washington, D.C. communications. The U.S. agency in charge of secure communication for the White House has been the victim of a cyber attack. The U.S. Department of Defense confirmed that computer systems controlled by the Defense Information Systems Agency, known as DISA, had been hacked, exposing the personal data of about 200,000 people. The agency oversees military communications, including calls for the United States President Donald Trump. The data exposed included names and social security numbers. The agency is responsible for the military cybersecurity, and it sets up communications networks in combat zones. On its website, DISA says its vision is to be the trusted provider to connect and protect the warfighter in cyberspace. There are 8,000 military and civilian employees at DISA, but through its operations, it handles data for many other individuals. This is why the personal information for so many people was exposed. With hack attacks, a spokesperson for the Department of Defense would not say whether the organization knew who was responsible for this attack, but told the BBC the department was constantly under threat. The Department of Defense networks are under attack daily, and the department maintains an active posture to thwart those attacks, the spokesperson said. The agency said it has been notifying people who had been affected, but that there was no evidence their information has been misused. The data breach occurred over the summer of 2019, and letters to possible victims began going out this month. The agency said once the breach on its computer system was discovered, it investigated and took steps to fix it and prevent further hacks. Andy Piazza, a US veteran and cyber threat analyst, posted the letter he received from DICE on Twitter. Mr. Piazza told the BBC he was not particularly concerned about the information that may have been compromised, but he felt there had been an increase in the number of letters he was receiving from public and private firms about data breaches. DICE's policies require it to notify anyone whose data may have been compromised. The agency said it will follow up with information on how to mitigate any damage, and that anyone who was affected will be offered free credit monitoring services. Our last news is about the smartphone security. Your skin and a software which will detect your skin could actually improve our smartphone security. Smartphones such as the iPhone and Pixel allow us users to unlock the device with their faces, but sometimes that software can be fooled. Software company Trinamics has developed an alternative that it says is harder to trick. It hopes to expand the technology outside of the phone and integrate it to things such as monitoring passengers in self-driving cars and augmented and virtual reality. Thanks to Zoe Thomas from BBC's technology reporter about this news. I really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dr. Yavuz Selim Sılay, physician entrepreneur as well as venture architect, and I want to thank you for your support to 5TN and Ntr TV. Please check ntrtv.com.tr and call us and leave us messages if you like this program to our WhatsApp numbers. Take care and all the best. Bye.